All right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Fontaine Foxworth. I'm one of the product managers working on Firebase Analytics here at Google. And I was actually supposed to be doing this presentation with a colleague of mine, but 2 days ago he told me he wasn't going to be able to do it because his wife is having a baby the next day or so, and he felt like one big launch this week wasn't enough. So I'll be flying solo, so you'll have to bear with me. So we're going to be talking about Firebase Analytics, and we'll be talking it in the context of growth. So actually growing your user base, trying to get more users into your app, and then keeping them there. And I'm going to talk about Firebase Analytics in 3 sections. First, I'll give a quick overview of Firebase Analytics. Hopefully some of you guys have stopped by our sandbox or attended some of the other sessions, so it might not be new. But I'll go ahead and give a quick recap. And then I'll be talking about using analytics to actually track your paid acquisition campaigns. So looking at advertising and tracking advertising with Firebase Analytics. And then finally, we're going to touch on organic growth. So actually, a couple of tools that you can use with Firebase and track using Firebase Analytics, since we know that as a marketer, advertising is only one of the tools that you're using. And when we're actually going through this, I'll be using a hypothetical marketer named Mike. Now, let's start with the reason why so many of us are here. We've got consumers spending a lot of time in mobile apps when they're on their phones. So between Google Play and the App Store, we've got millions of apps that are generating north of $50 billion annually. So that is a lot of value coming from a lot of users. So how do we actually reach those users? How do we present opportunities for those users to discover our apps? We know that on average, a user is unlocking their phone 150 times a day. They're usually doing specific tasks, like calling an Uber, or maybe looking for a nearby coffee shop, looking for a game to download when they're waiting for the bus. I like to think of these as 150 opportunities for us as marketers, different chances that we can get in front of our users and show them content that they could be interested in. But even though we have these 150 opportunities a day, the ecosystem has created a lot of challenges for us as marketers. So a couple quick highlights. First of all, it can be hard to actually find the right user in your app. So figuring out who that target audience should be, making sure it's a relevant market, making sure you're finding them on the correct devices, at the right time, etc. That's always an issue. Secondly, mobile technology is just hard. You know, people who are new to marketing on apps, I feel like, are always surprised when they realize there aren't cookies on apps. You've got advertising identifiers, IDFAs. They don't work well with cookies on mobile web. So the technology that was designed to help us connect with our users often actually ends up getting in the way. And not to mention, of course, the app stores, right? Google Play and the App Store, they add a step in between giving our users an ad or something like that and actually discovering the app. So it's 1 step or 3, depending on how you look at it. So this creates a clouding marketing picture at best. And then finally, I feel like we're drowning in tools. So every time I meet a developer, I always ask them what analytics tools are they using. And almost certainly they rattle off 4 or 5 different analytics tools they're using. And they're using all of them. They're just using them for different things, right? So they could have an SDK for tracking crash reporting, or one for tracking push notifications, or behavioral in-app analytics, or conversion tracking. So each one of these SDKs in and of themselves aren't that big, not that much work to add. But when you start adding them all together, you know, that's 4 or 5 SDKs for different types of analytics that you're using in your app. When you look at them all together, they could add bloat to your app. And certainly, as developers, I know that we don't like adding extra code every time a marketer asks for another tool. And that's just looking on the development side. But when you're actually consuming that data in the UI, you've got different databases, different systems, and these different data silos don't speak well together. They were never designed to work together. so you end up making your decisions in a couple of different disparate places. And that's why we are bringing to you Firebase Analytics and Firebase, because we're really trying to do something different by offering this platform. So unless you've been living under a rock for the last few days, you should know that Firebase is a suite of integrated products that we're introducing to help you develop your app, grow your user base, and earn money. And Firebase Analytics is really at the core of this platform. I thought it was pretty impressive the way that this designer designed this graphic. Quite literally, analytics is at the core of this image. But not only is it connecting all of the different products within Firebase Analytics, but it helps you understand each phase of the customer journey. So you can really get an end-to-end picture of what's going on in your app. Now, adding Firebase to your app is as simple as 1, 2, 3. 1 is registering your app on Firebase.com, so you can actually create that instance within our system. Secondly, you're given a configuration file, which you'll be adding to the app. And third, you add 2 lines of code on iOS, and you just adjust your configuration file on Android, and just like that, you're up and running with Firebase. And this is a one-time task that you would do to instrument any of the features in Firebase. But no matter which feature you're implementing, you will get Firebase Analytics by default. So it's a pretty easy way to get up and running, to immediately start asking questions of your data. Now, I see Firebase Analytics being particularly helpful in 3 different ways. First of all, it's completely free and unlimited. When we set out a while ago to completely redesign an app analytics product from the ground up, free and unlimited was one of our founding tenets. We wanted to make sure that you as developers had access to all of your data without compromise. So no hit limits, no sampling, and it's your data. And this was built by the knowledge of the developers and product managers of Google Analytics for apps. So we were able to take learnings from several years and hundreds of thousands of apps to take what we have and the feedback that we've been getting from our users to truly build an app analytics product that is built for app developers. And then we have automatic event reporting. So with Firebase Analytics, immediately after plugging in the SDK, you're getting over 12 analytics events captured automatically. So you can log into your dashboard, and you'll see a bunch of information without logging any additional information. But if you're new to analytics, maybe you don't know exactly how to instrument your app, we also give you guides for different verticals about what we recommend to instrument in your app, different events that we suggest you capture. And this can be used, of course, as a guide if you're new to analytics, but it is also helpful because we give you dedicated event reporting for those specific events. So if you have a specific retail event, we'll give you a report for that. Or if a specific game event, again, we'll give you a dedicated report for that. Since we understand the context, the syntax of that event, those parameters, we'll make sure to give you a report that makes sense in the context of that event. And then finally, Firebase Analytics is seamlessly integrated with the rest of Firebase. And it's not just seamlessly integrated with the rest of Firebase, it's also integrated across Google. Again, integration was one of our founding tenets of Firebase Analytics, since we knew that developers are instrumenting, they could have 14 different developer tools in their app. Again, they don't speak to each other. And what we wanted to do with Firebase was have a single platform where you can come to one place to do all of the developer tasks you need. So integration is a key point that I'm going to be diving into it a little bit more later. And of course, Firebase Analytics works on both iOS and Android, since we know that successful app developers are building on both platforms. And we're committed to being platform agnostic. Now, if you attended our session on Wednesday, you saw that Firebase Analytics can be used to help develop your app, grow your user base, and earn money. And this is really, it's not a linear path, right? It's a cycle. So you'll be taking each one of these actions over and over, rinse, repeat. But right now in this session, we'll be talking about Firebase Analytics in the context of growth. and how you can actually use it to augment your marketing strategy. All right, we're going to look at it in the context of a real app. So we've got this app, Transworld Endless Skater. It's available on both iOS and Android. And it allows users to try to attempt the longest runs in the game. And they can select from 5 different pro skaters that have different skills and tricks that they have access to. And another thing that you can do in this game is you can spend on in-app purchases to purchase virtual currency in the game. And then once you're in the game, you can spend that virtual currency on other tricks, unlock new levels, or whatever. But the important part to note is that Skate's in-game economy works. So if we can find more users, bring them into the app, then Transworld Endless Skater should make more money. And that's why we hired Mike, this marketer. Now, Mike's responsible for growing Transworld Endless Skater, and he decides that now is the right time to get the app in the hands of his users. It's right around finals time. Maybe he's looking to take advantage of some folks who are just getting off school and looking to find a new game for the summer, or maybe they just need something to procrastinate while they're studying. But he thinks now's the time. And he sets a pretty ambitious goal of 300,000 installs that he's trying to drive. He's starting at around 10,000 installs, so he definitely has a lot of work cut out for him. And he thinks Firebase Analytics can help. So he logs into the Firebase console, and immediately when he gets here, he notices a ton of data is already available for him. And this is because Mike's developer named Andy had actually already been using the Firebase product for a series of other features. So Mike never had to ask Andy to add any new SDK because it was already there for him. The analytics was already available to him. So he logs in, he sees a ton of rich data, a bunch of events are being captured automatically. He can see his monthly active users, he can see his revenue numbers, etc. Now he navigates to the events section of the app. I like to think of events as like the currency that Firebase Analytics actually runs on. These are also what I like to describe as the verbs or the action words in the app. So things like level up or in-app purchase, whatever these are. And he notices a lot of the events that have been logged automatically by just plugging in the SDK. So he can see app update, he can see OS update, session start, etc., even in-app purchase. Since this is a game and Firebase Analytics captures in-app purchase data automatically on both iOS and Android. And he also notices a couple of events that were captured by Andy that are specific to games. So you can see at the bottom there, spend virtual currency and unlock achievement. These are 2 games that are specific to games that Andy had registered, logged in the code with just a line or 2 of code. And these actually contain pretty rich information about games specifically. I had highlighted those different vertical specific events earlier. These are some examples of those. So if he were to click into them, he would actually see some reporting around them. And then Mike navigates to the attribution tab. So in the attribution tab, he can see his conversions. His conversions are the things, the business drivers in his app that he's really looking to optimize his business around. So first open and in-app purchase, we know these are really common conversion events, so we'll enable those for him automatically. But Mike also has the opportunity to enable any of the events that he has access to be conversions. And he can do this in the Events tab. On the far right column, there's an Enable Conversion toggle. By turning those on, they will add those events to the attribution table. Now, marking something as a conversion, that basically unlocks some features and functionality for that event. So you can do attribution reporting, so you can see cross-channel campaign performance for your different conversions. Now, we talked about Mike had automatically gotten in-app purchase and first open, but he decides to go ahead and indicate spend virtual currency to also be one of the conversions that he wants to optimize towards. So I want to step back really quickly and talk about We've talked about the attribution section and generally what you can do within Firebase Analytics, but now I want to talk about the paid part of marketing, look at how you can integrate Firebase Analytics with your advertising efforts. So Mike knows that he's going to be driving 300,000 installs, and if he's going to be spending that much money, then he really needs to make sure he understands the tools that he has access to. And so that is why he wants to basically understand what Firebase Analytics can actually do for him. Now, a key part of our integration with Firebase Analytics has been being able to integrate across other Google products. And with Firebase Analytics, one of our most important integrations from day one has been our integration with AdWords. We know that if you've run marketing campaigns with AdWords in the past, it can be sometimes difficult to actually track your conversions. So we know that you've had to keep track of your conversion ID, your conversion labels. It can be a headache. Oftentimes you had to make code changes to run a marketing campaign. And this can often sometimes create friction between the marketers and the developers in a product org. So we've been very deliberate about actually shaping our integration between AdWords and Firebase. So it comes in a couple of different parts. The first part is you establish a link between your Firebase app and your AdWords account. By establishing that link, that handshake, a bunch of features get unlocked. For example, you get conversion tracking, and you can import any of the conversions that you had access to in Firebase. You can track your AdWords campaigns against them. And then secondly, you can also target the audiences that you've created using your Firebase Analytics data in AdWords. So a really powerful way that shouldn't require any code changes from the marketing perspective. You should be able to do everything you need as a marketer directly from the UI. All right, so Mike decides to run some universal app campaigns. And universal app campaigns are an AdWords feature that were launched last year to basically make your life as an app marketer a lot easier. So Google has access to all of these touch points when users are on their mobile phones, right? There's google.com and users searching for apps in google.com. Of course, there's Google Play and actually discovering those apps in the Play Store. We have the mobile display network, so both on mobile web and across other apps and ad inventory and AdMob. And then finally, of course, YouTube, right? So we have all these different touch points, and instead of asking you as a marketer to continue to maintain each one of these channels and have individual strategies for each one of these, you can book a campaign once with universal app campaigns, and then we will deploy those campaigns across all of these different touch points to remove some of the burden on you as a marketer. So, from past experience, Mike knows that universal app campaigns are pretty effective at running cost-efficient CPIs. But basically, he knows this could be a good approach to actually acquiring some of those 300,000 users that he has as a goal. And so the first thing that he's going to do, as we talked about earlier, log into AdWords. He's going to link his AdWords campaign with his Firebase. He's going to link his AdWords account with his Firebase project. So this is a one-time task, and then the rest of his campaigns and data will flow seamlessly. He's going to select which conversions to import into AdWords, and as we highlighted on the attribution tab, we're going to have the first open, which is basically like installs, driving installs. Secondly, he's going to be importing his in-app purchases, so it's the items that are being purchased in the app. And then finally, it's that third conversion, the spend virtual currency conversion. Even though he's focused on driving installs, those are like first opens, he still wants to import all of the conversions that he has access to, since those are good signs of engagement, and he'd like to measure the performance of his ad campaigns across those in-app events, as well as his first opens. So he's linked his AdWords account. He's imported the conversions he cares about. And then finally, later on, we'll look at an example of him actually using remarketing campaigns for the audiences that he has access to. All right. But Mike also knows that he doesn't want to put all of his eggs in one basket. He thinks that AdWords will be powerful, but he doesn't want to bet on that entirely. So that's why he's also running campaigns with a couple of other networks. So within Firebase Analytics, on the attribution section, which is going to be the home page basically for any marketer using the product, he can go into the network settings tab and access over 20 major ad networks to run campaigns with. So they don't have to be Google networks. These are other networks that we as Firebase are partnering with. And he goes ahead and sets up a campaign for Advise. Now, Advise is a hypothetical ad network, but he knows or he thinks it could be successful. And there's a couple of different steps. First of all, he's going to generate a tracking URL that's available to him within the Firebase UI. And this tracking URL, he'll be able to send over to Advise. It'll include a lot of the metadata that we need to do a click tracking with Advise. Now, if you've ever tried to track acquisition campaigns before, especially if you tried to do it with Google Analytics, this was a lot harder to do. But now we've embedded this URL builder into the product, and we've explicitly developed these integrations with a whole bunch of different networks. So from your perspective, all you have to do is copy and paste this URL, put it in your ad network when you're actually running the campaigns, and this will be the destination. We'll do the rest of the processing from here. So this is for attribution tracking, and if he ran the campaign with this, when he logs into his attribution section later, he would be able to see for his install campaigns basically all the Advise installs that he's brought in. But if he's doing this, then he's not putting the Advise SDK in his app, which is, of course, one of the main reasons why he's using Firebase Analytics. But he knows that in order to best work with Advise, it usually helps if he sends data back to Advise, some of his conversion data, so they can actually do optimization in their systems. So this is where postbacks comes in. Postbacks is the ability for an advertiser to send their conversion data back to the ad networks they work with. This is one of the main reasons why you can replace all of these specific ad network UI SDKs with the single Firebase SDK. So in Firebase, you're collecting all the data, but with postbacks, you're sending it back to the networks that you're working with. And so here in the postback section at the bottom, he selects the conversions that he actually wants to send back. So he's going to select all three conversions: first open, spend virtual currency, and in-app purchase. And then also, he has the option to send just the conversions that Advise is responsible for bringing him, or all the conversions that he's gotten with his app. And Mike's feeling pretty generous, so he's going to go ahead and select to send all of the conversions that he's gotten with his app, because he knows that Advise is going to do the best job optimizing when they have more information. All right. Another thing I didn't tell you when he was setting up the Universal App Campaign was that when he set up his app campaign, he decided to target the US and Australia. And the reason why he did that was because last week when Mike was on Twitter, he saw a couple of folks in Australia mentioning Transworld Endless Skater. And when he clicked around, he was exploring. Turns out that there is a pretty engaged developer community, or pretty engaged gaming community in Australia that had discovered Transworld Endless Skater and was pretty excited about it. However, when he looked at the performance of the app in Australia, he noticed that only less than 10% of his users are actually coming from Australia. And so this basically led him to believe that maybe there's this untapped market in Australia, that maybe he should actually be running more campaigns there. Hence why he had targeted his Universal App Campaign at Australia specifically. So to test this hypothesis, he goes into the audiences section of Firebase Analytics and creates an audience of users who are in Australia. So, because he wants to continue to analyze this particular segment of users and see if in fact he was right that this could be a potentially high value segment. So you can see here the list of the audiences he has access to. He just recently created this Australian users one, and next time he comes into the experience, he can see if his hypothesis was in fact correct. All right, so at this point I want to talk about moving the needle, or moving the bottom line. So up until this point, I've just been talking about more installs, but something we haven't been talking about is around monetization. And currently with Firebase Analytics, we track revenue for you for the in-app purchase event and the e-commerce event purchase event. So these are the transactional events that we know are revenue-based, and so that's what's factoring into our ARPU or into our LTV metrics. So Mike here has two additional goals beyond the installs goals that I talked about earlier. We had that 300,000 installs goals, but he also has an engagement metric that he's trying to drive of moving the daily average engagement up from 15 minutes to 20 minutes. And then secondly, he has a monetization goal of moving his ARPU from what was originally 90 cents to $3. And when he checks in after he's been running these ad campaigns, he was able to move it up to at least $1.50. So it's somewhere, it's made some movement. But between $1.50 and $3, he has a lot of work to do. So to actually dig into to figure out how he would better move the needle and figure out how he could drive up that ARPU, he clicks into the funnels section of Firebase Analytics. And in funnels, you can create basically a visualization of different events in your app and how they relate to one another. See how users are actually moving through different parts of your user journey. He creates a pretty simple funnel. This one's called purchasers. It has only 2 steps. The first step is users who basically ever launched the app. It's users who had first open. And then the second step is users who actually went on to make an in-app purchase. When he creates this funnel, he realizes his conversion rate is a very measly 0.3%. So not very many people are actually placing purchases. So definitely room for improvement. So he's trying to figure out basically how he could make a difference on this front. And to do this, he comes back to the attribution tab. He's looking at all the relative campaign performance next to each other. And he sees that there's one network, I'm calling Stomp Network here, that is performing much lower than some of the other ones. So it is bringing in a couple hundred installs, so good volume, but when he looks at the lifetime value metric for this particular network, he realizes it's at 0. So they're bringing in installs, but it's not really the installs he's looking for. So he decides to go ahead and reallocate his funds away from Stomp Network and invest them in another place. All right, so that's one thing he did to actually hopefully bump up that ARPU number. We're going to talk about a couple more in a few minutes. Now, another thing he notices is he had run that AdWords campaign, and over the last week, he has seen over 50% of the new users he's been acquiring have been from Australia. So that's comforting. It looks like maybe, in fact, that hypothesis was a reasonable hypothesis that Australia could be an untapped market for him. All right, and then there's a couple more ways that he's going to try to move that ARPU metric up a little bit more. The first is when he came into the audiences section, he found that there was an audience named purchasers. So this is basically any of the users that were purchasing in his app. And when he clicked in, he realized that there was actually a pretty high distribution of his purchasers who were in Japan. Now, this is interesting because A, the app is not localized in Japan. He's not trying to do anything to drive users in Japan specifically. And then when he looks at just his plain usage numbers, the distribution of users in Japan wasn't particularly high. But for some reason, it seems like the users who are in Japan are more inclined to actually purchase. So he decides to go ahead and run a campaign, an acquisition campaign, with creative localized in Japanese. So even though the app isn't localized in Japanese, he wants to see if potentially localizing his creative in Japanese in his ad campaigns might make a difference to actually bring in more Japanese users. And the second thing that he does is he creates a re-engagement campaign using his purchasers' audience. So in AdWords, he sets up a re-engagement campaign and he targets those that he already knows have actually purchased in the app. So they're known purchasers, they're users he wants to continue to foster a relationship with, and so he sets up a retargeting campaign for these users specifically. So those are 2 additional things beyond taking funds away from Stomp Network that he's trying to do to optimize his ARPU. All right, and now it's at the end of the month, and I'm happy to report that Mike has succeeded in many of his goals. So first of all, he was able to exceed the 300,000 installs goal that we set out at the beginning of the session. He was also able to move the needle on the daily average engagement metric. So it had started off at 15 minutes, and now we're at 23 minutes. And then finally, for the ARPU metric, where we listed out those couple of different things that we did to try to move the needle on that front, he was able to move it up to $3.30 when his initial goal was $3. So happy to report that Mike and his team will be able to celebrate with drinks tonight, much like I hope that me and my team will be able to celebrate with drinks tonight after this week. All right, so I talked a lot about advertising and how Firebase Analytics can be used for advertising. But I also want to highlight a couple of ways that it can be used in conjunction with some of your organic tools, since we know that as a marketer, you're probably not just running ad campaigns. That's just one of the tools that you're using in your toolbox, but you've got a couple other channels as well. So first of all, I want to touch on Firebase notifications. So notifications are a great way to engage in a conversation with your users directly. And on Firebase Analytics, they're supported on both iOS and Android. And like Firebase Analytics, they're totally free and unlimited. So a really powerful way to engage in a conversation with your users directly for re-engagement purposes. And there's two particular integrations with analytics that I want to highlight. So first of all, similar to AdWords, you can target the audiences that you've created in Firebase Analytics within notifications. So you can be serving them experiences that make sense in that context. And then also, you can use Firebase Analytics to actually understand how your campaigns performed. So how many notification opens did you get? How many opens did you actually drive with a particular push notification? Or for users that came in on a particular campaign, what did their behavior look like once they entered the app? You can apply that as a filter throughout the Firebase experience, throughout the Firebase Analytics experience, to actually see how users who came from a particular notification then went on to navigate your app. You can also measure it against your conversions. So how many in-app purchases did a particular campaign drive? Second type of organic channel I want to highlight is the app invites. So app invites are a great way to facilitate the relationship between your users and their contacts. So it's not just about you and your users and that relationship, but actually facilitating a bigger network. So again, you can use Firebase Analytics to identify groups that you would want to actually notify, reach out to, target those users, and then give them the opportunity to share the app using SMS or email to bring in their most frequently contacted users. Of course, you can pair this with dynamic links, which I know there's been a couple other sessions for, where you could actually take users to a specific screen in the app once they've clicked through on a download. And then finally, we have app indexing. So Google has indexed over 100 billion deep links, and 40% of all Android queries return app links. So basically, this is an incredible opportunity for exposure for marketers to actually help users find content within their apps. So you can imagine, initially when apps were created, apps were very much walled gardens, and in some cases they still can be. But with features like app indexing, we're really looking to help our users discover the content within the app without actually having to navigate through the full app to experience that. This is particularly powerful when it comes to re-engagement and trying to get your known users back into the app. Now, there's a couple of different companies that I think have done this really well that I want to highlight. So these are 3 different examples of apps, and these are all search engine results page. So you can imagine this is basically what a user would see. And here are these blue dots are where the user would actually be clicking. So first up on the left here, we've got the Realtor.com app, and the query in Google here is, I think, homes for sale in Sunnyvale. And so when I click on that line item, which is at the top here, I get taken inside the Realtor.com app to a map focused on Sunnyvale, able to see all of the homes for sale. So pretty cool that I, as a user, had to do no additional work beyond clicking. And I'm in the app. It's a much more rich experience, and it's exactly what I set out to look for in the first place. All right, here in the middle, I've got an example of me searching for the restaurant Cookery in San Francisco. And when I click on the TripAdvisor link, I'm taken directly to that listing in the TripAdvisor app. I can see the reviews for that particular restaurant. And then finally on the right, I've got the Expedia app. I'm looking at hotels in Tokyo, and similar to the homes in Mountain View or homes in Sunnyvale that I saw a minute ago, I'm taken into the app. I can see a map with all of the available hotels. So pretty powerful way to get our users exactly what they want with a ton of context while making them do very little work. All right, so enough from the PM on Firebase Analytics about why Firebase is so great. I want to let you hear from a couple of our app developers who've been using some of the tools as well. So I think actually Joe is here in the audience. He's from Spark People. Joe's right over here. And so Joe shared with us the ability to sync his AdWords data to Firebase Analytics has simplified his daily management and optimization from hours to minutes. So he can spend more time building an app that his users will love. I would love to have hours back in my day, so wish somebody would do this for my job. But pretty cool to see how building these types of tools can make, basically create more time for our app developers to do the thing that they actually want to do instead of the thing that they need to do because tools are making them do it. And then we also had Recruit, which is a Japanese company, using the integration between AdWords and Firebase. And one of the marketing managers over on that front had emailed us that AdWords and Firebase Analytics just work better together. So we built Firebase Analytics to be a growth engine for you guys as marketers. So you can develop and grow your user base, whether you consider yourself a developer or a marketer. As a quick recap of this conversation, I covered a couple of different things. First, I highlighted Firebase Analytics in general. Then we talked about how you could actually use it to track your advertising or paid channels. And then finally, we wrapped up by talking about some of the organic or non-advertising channels that you can use Firebase Analytics with. So as we've been crafting Firebase Analytics, we've been very deliberate about building a tool that would work well, not just for developers, but also for marketers. So we're really excited to see what you guys will do with this. Thank you.